We should really laugh away accusation of anti-Semitism. I know that if you are a political figure, they think it is fatal if someone calls them anti-Semitic. But if you are an academic, if you are an activist, if they call you, wear that as a sign of distinction. This proves that I am working for the right side, for the just cause.
The pro-Israel narrative, which I think transcends what is reasonable and gets into the realm of the fanatic in terms of their ability to control or influence American government policies.
James Baker and his president, the good George, they were able to stand up to Israel and get them to the table, get them to negotiate, twist their arms. What's wrong with that? So we can say this, and Hamas is a terrorist organization, sure. They also do great healthcare in kindergartens.
I felt that my character, my religion, my home, and everything about what it is to be Jewish in today's world was attacked.
In many academic institutions around the U.S., Israel has become the subject of relentless criticism and outright demonization. According to a 2006 report to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism find expression inside and outside the classroom, in course syllabi, student newspapers, campus posters, rallies, lecture halls, and a host of other ways within the university. Middle East Studies departments and centers are particularly egregious in their promotion of anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism. The demonization of the Jewish state on campuses undermines university administration claims of providing a hostility-free learning environment. Instances of professors abusing their position to demonize the Jewish state are most common in such bastions of radicalism as the University of California system, especially at UC Irvine and UC Berkeley, and also at Columbia University in New York. It's somewhat surprising to find this at Northeastern University, which is generally considered a less political place. Northeastern University, located in Boston, Massachusetts, is one of the largest private universities in the United States. The university describes itself as a leader in global experiential learning.
I love the university. I think everything about the university is great. It has unique opportunities through its co-op programs. It has vast resources for all its students to get ahead and learn new things and acquire new skills. And I would never trade my university for another one. But at that same time, it doesn't mean I can't be critical of things I think are very worrisome in the academic setting.
Northeastern's administration is supportive of Jewish students in general. Still, it tolerates radical Northeastern faculty who actively promote an anti-Israel agenda. One of them is Professor Dennis Sullivan.
Hi, my name is Dennis Sullivan. I'm a professor of political science at Northeastern University in Boston. I'm also director of the Middle East Center for Peace, Culture, and Development.
Northeastern Professor Dennis Sullivan exerts a significant influence on his students, fellow faculty, and the greater Boston community.
He is vehemently anti-Israel, and he claims to be unbiased, but students that take his classes and tell me all the time about the incredible bias that he has, and Dennis Sullivan will disagree with them and give them a bad grade because of it.
You can also tell that by a lot of the readings, the literature that they bring into the course, a lot of the lectures they bring into the course. Everything seems to be focused on a Palestinian narrative, on a Muslim perspective, on an Arab perspective.
When you mention anything of the sort of, Israel was acting in its security interests, or Israel was trying to, eradicate the suicide bomber threat by building a security fence or something like this, you're automatically labeled as a radical, as if the deaths of Israelis are irrelevant.
Professor Sullivan's background casts doubt on his impartiality as a scholar of Middle East history. He is a former advisor to the Palestinian Authority. He had also been the head of the American branch of the Palestinian American Research Center, an anti-Israel think tank.
He's very anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, and a lot of the things that he said throughout the class from day one to the last day were focused on your most fanatic interpretations of events.
Boston University professor Richard Kravitz is president of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, an organization of academics dedicated to honest, fact-based, and civil discourse in regard to Middle East issues.
The danger is that students, Jewish and otherwise, go through college hearing lies and distortions and politicized scholarship coming from professors who they normally would believe would know the truth and would be teaching the truth, and end up having a distorted and inaccurate view of Israel and its relationship to the Middle East, and by extension, Jewish people.
A close look at Sullivan's lectures, assigned readings, guest lecturers, and study abroad trips exposes Sullivan's abuse of his courses to indoctrinate students with 3 big lies of anti-Israel propaganda. 1. Powerful Jews control America's foreign policy. 2. Israel is a Nazi-like criminal state. 3. Hamas and other terrorist organizations are legitimate resistance groups. One of the U.S. State Department's criteria for defining the new anti-Semitism is the belief in the myth about a world Jewish conspiracy of Jews controlling the media, economy, government, or other societal institutions.
There is a strong pro-Israel lobby in the United States that's not simply Jewish. You have a Christian Zionist cause, if you will, Christian Zionist movement that has over a century, if not 2 centuries, of interest in this region for millennial purposes, meaning the Jews have to take control of their historic homelands. And I think it's silly and against American national interests.
Students taking Professor Sullivan's classes are assigned readings like The Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy by John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt. The Anti-Defamation League called Mearsheimer's and Walt's article a classical conspiratorial anti-Semitic analysis because of the one-sidedness of their presentation. They may not be anti-Semites themselves, but they made a cynical decision to cash in on anti-Semitism by offering to dress up old hatreds in the dowdy Brooks Brothers suits of the Kennedy School and the University of Chicago.
These writers and Professor Sullivan believe that Israel, in their view, does not deserve support and is getting support from America, largely. The reason, they say, is because Jews are powerful and unscrupulous.
And yet, if you mention anything critical in America, oh, you're anti-Israeli, you're anti-Semitic, all this other stuff.
The notion of an all-powerful Israel lobby controlling America is also supported by Rami Khoury, a longtime member of Professor Sullivan's Middle East Center.
The pro-Israel narrative, which I think transcends what is reasonable and gets into the realm of the fanatic in terms of their ability to control or influence American government policies.
Dennis Sullivan sends Northeastern students on study abroad trips he calls the Dialogue of Civilizations, 4 to 6 week faculty-led trips that provide Northeastern students with a global experience. In 2009, it brought students to Egypt, where they met with Zahi Hawass, a former Minister of State for Antiquities Affairs who regards American Jews as part of a worldwide conspiracy.
التشريد بتاعهم ده منتشر في العالم كله. في العالم كله. قوة راحوا أمريكا، سيطروا على اقتصاد أمريكا. طبعا هم عندهم تخطيطهم كله إن هم القلة بتاعتهم سيطرت على كل العالم.
According to the State Department, another definition of the new anti-Semites is their practicing of drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. Such comparisons are the second big lie in Sullivan's courses, in which he teaches students that Israel is a Nazi-like criminal state. Sullivan assigns his students readings from the factually dubious book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine by radical professor Ian Pappé.
Ian Pappé, who did write a book called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, recently published. Essentially, it's one big lie, in my view. Its sources are suspect, incorrect, distorted, invented in part.
Pappé argues that Zionism is one of the most dangerous identities in the world and has called for an international boycott of Israeli academics. He is a prominent opponent of the two-state solution for Israel and Palestine and favors the elimination of the only Jewish state.
The only racist state is the Jewish state of Israel. And I think that the message of ethnic cleansing is the message of criminalizing not the policies of the state of Israel, but criminalizing the state of Israel. And we should do this.
Sullivan's syllabus also includes Israel-Palestine, How to End the War of 1948 by radical Israeli professor and pro-Palestinian activist Tanya Reinhardt.
I think what Israel is doing is far worse than apartheid. The model now is of ethnic cleansing. I would say it's a genocide. It's trying to get as many Palestinians out of their land as possible, trying to kill them slowly.
In his course on the Arab-Israeli conflict, Sullivan assigned students readings by Norman Finkelstein, the notorious author of The Holocaust Industry. The New York Times called Finkelstein's book a novel variation on the anti-Semitic forgery, The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. In the book, Finkelstein charges Israelis with being the new Nazis. The Zionists indeed learnt well from the Nazis, so well that it seems that their morally repugnant treatment of the Palestinians reveals them as basically Nazis.
And that in a Sparta-like society filled with bloodlust, killing Arabs is a sure crowd pleaser.
If you've never heard of Norm Finkelstein, be careful when you Google him. He is a very controversial person, I should say, and there's a clear campaign against him as an individual. He's Jewish. And yet the controversy resides around his writings about Israel's use of the Holocaust for political justifications. This Thursday night in this room at 7 p.m., Dr. Norman Finkelstein will be here. Sorry I'm not here. I'm going to be in Washington.
Speakers like Norman Finkelstein, for example, are frequently the guests of the Muslim student associations on campuses all over America. They love him. He's been called the dream Jew of anti-Semites.
We are here protesting the fact that the university is paying for an anti-Semite to speak. It's being paid for the student activity fee, which comes directly from our tuition.
Campus cultural events are also used to demonize Israel outside the classroom. In 2010, Sullivan's Middle East Center co-sponsored the Palestinian hip-hop band Damn. Its most famous song, Who's the Terrorist?, says Israelis are just like Nazis. During the performance, Northeastern students were encouraged to sing along with the band.
Every single thing that they would do, historically, religiously, he would find a way to make that to demonize it and to make it look like an evil action against an innocent child.
During Sullivan's 2009 Dialogue of Civilizations trip, students went to Syria, where they met with officials of the tyrannical Assad regime, which is currently in the process of slaughtering tens of thousands of its own people. These officials included Syria's head of propaganda, Minister of Information, Moshe Bilal. Bilal has referred to the Jewish state as the barbaric and racist state of Israel, and the snake ready to attack at any minute, even if it knows it will die. On March 19, 2011, Northeastern University hosted a lecture by the Grand Mufti of Egypt, Sheikh Ali Goma, titled The Radical Middle, Building Bridges Between America and the Muslim World. Professor Sullivan characterized Goma's visit to Northeastern as a momentous occasion, adding that at the core of the Middle East Center is the desire to have these kinds of dialogues. Northeastern's provost, Stephen Director, personally thanked the Mufti for his thoughtful, stimulating presentation. But the Northeastern community was not told that Mufti Goma is a vicious anti-Semite and supporter of terrorism. In 2006, Goma wrote an article in which he repeated the ancient blood libel lies against Jews by referring to Israelis as bloodsuckers who planned to prepare a matzah using human blood and violated all the principles accepted by the human race. Addressing the terrorist organization Hezbollah, the Mufti assured that its jihad against the Jewish state will not be in vain. He also supported suicide bombers. While Sullivan teaches students to believe that Israel is an evil genocidal state, he also encourages them to admire Hamas and other terrorist organizations, despite them being outlawed by the United States. Supporting Hamas, which openly calls for the murder of all Jews, is also defined as anti-Semitism by the State Department, which condemns justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or an extremist view of religion.
Professor Sullivan would not like to use the word terrorist or terrorism.
In fact, Sullivan finds much to praise about Hamas.
So we can say this, and Hamas is a terrorist organization, sure. They also do great healthcare and kindergartens. Hamas doesn't recognize Israel. So what?
The Hamas kindergartens are, in fact, notorious indoctrination factories, instilling young children with vicious hatred and enmity towards Israelis and Jews, while promoting love of martyrdom. Sullivan assigned students readings by Sarah Roy, a senior research scholar at the Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Harvard University. Roy has claimed that the Nazi treatment of Jews and Israeli soldiers' treatment of Palestinians were, in her opinion, absolutely equivalent in principle, intent, and impact to humiliate and dehumanize.
Hamas itself is a far more pragmatic movement than its typical representation. This is not a group that is the same by any stretch of the imagination as the Taliban or the kinds of government you would see in Iran.
Another faculty member, a native of Iraq and a former instructor of Mosul University in Iraq, Dr. Shakir Mustafa, signed a petition that defended Hezbollah, a virulently anti-Semitic organization designated as terrorist by the U.S. government. The petition accuses Israel of a racist, supremacist ideology that denigrates the indigenous population, their culture, and their very existence.
In Middle Eastern studies, the people doing the hiring of new faculty are people that have the party line as far as thinking about the Middle East goes. And typically that means that they're people that are not friendly to Israel or Zionism. They're post-colonial theorists who blame all of the ills and dysfunction of the Middle East on imperialism and Western states and Western interventions.
The anti-Israel bias promoted by Professor Sullivan may lead many of his students to draw false conclusions regarding Israel, as seen in this promotional interview Sullivan recorded on his website with a young, highly impressionable Jewish student.
Well, I'm Jewish, and my mom has talked about the Arab-Israeli conflict somewhat in my house, not a lot, but I just thought it would be an interesting class to take.
In terms of your understanding or feelings or attitudes toward the conflict or the people involved in the conflict, have you gained a lot more than you thought, or is it pretty much standard stuff that you knew already? Or
I didn't really know details, and so this has taught me a ton already about the history that goes into it, and I'm excited about talking about it with my mom because I don't think she knows a lot either. And so I've learned a lot, and it's still really confusing to me. I have to keep going back and rereading the chapters and to try and make sense of it all because it's a lot to learn.
Did you feel like in these first few weeks you're getting a couple sides to the story? Or?
Sullivan's syllabi are demonstrably and persuasively one-sided, providing students with multiple viewpoints, but all from an anti-Israel perspective.
Yeah, definitely, and it's nice to be able to talk about it. I also wrote this to talk about it with one of my roommates. Was kind of afraid to talk about it with me because she was afraid that I was going to be pro-Israel and not really willing to discuss anything else. But I'm just, I'm learning a lot of different things, and now I feel like I could have a pretty educated conversation with her about what I think.
So you're also bringing this into your dorm room or your apartment?
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. Good.
I think the Jewish community in the Boston area should be very concerned with the issue of professors giving a one-sided view. Not everyone is exposed to what's going on or what's being what I think is indoctrination within the university.
Sadly, the Middle East Center is not the only source of anti-Israel hostility at Northeastern. Economics professor Shahid Alam, a citizen of Pakistan, is notorious on campus for his extreme anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, and anti-American views. Alam promotes the anti-Semitic conspiracy notion that a mostly Jewish elite group of neoconservatives sought to place American power in the service of Israel. The Jews who teach Middle East studies, Alam wrote, work to incite a civilizational war between Islam and the West. Alam takes pride and some credit in the transformation of Northeastern University to an anti-Israel campus over the past 10 years.
I have been teaching at Northeastern for 22 years. And, 10 years back, if I were to articulate the most modest, mildest of criticisms about Israel, there'd be a group of students who would jump on my jugular. And not one student would speak for the other side. Today, over the last few years, that situation has been entirely reversed. Completely reversed. So that, most of my students, many of my students understand the truth, know the truth. The young people know the truth.
In his 2004 article, Alam compared America's founding fathers to the terrorists behind the 9/11 attacks. The 19 Arab hijackers too demonstrated their willingness to die and to kill for what they believed was their dream.
Parties of Israel have been trying to shut out the daylight of truth about Zionism, about Israel, and the history of these two, and their crimes against humanity, their war crimes. I sort of pity the Israelis, because their whole life depends upon defending lies.
Alam openly admits that he uses his classroom as a platform to promote his political and anti-Israel agenda.
When I speak, in every course, all my courses are about the matters which allow me to talk about colonialism, settler colonialism, imperialism.
Professor Alam abuses his role as an educator by transforming his classroom into a platform to indoctrinate and intimidate students.
I talk about all these things, and people listen with great appreciation and attention, and no one disagrees. If there are one or two people who want to say they don't, because they can sense that they will get no support from the class.
The striking thing about the anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, politically correct position is that it really doesn't allow for discussion. And I think it doesn't allow for discussion because in a fair fight they'll lose. So they have to use their monopoly of the platform to exclude the other voice, lest people hear what the other side of this story is. And I think that's the real problem, is professors who use their pulpit not to express political points of view, but literally to propagandize a political point of view. And I think that goes on a lot.
Professor Alam also believes that anti-Semitism is something to be proud of.
We should really laugh away accusation of anti-Semitism. It has now become laughable. And there may come a time when you almost wear that label as a mark of distinction. Don't be afraid of someone calling you anti-Semitic. Laugh at them. Okay. Thanks for listening.
It is outrageous to see a speaker at Northeastern dismissing, even embracing anti-Jewish prejudice, openly expressing his pride at being an anti-Semite, and urging others to adopt that hateful path.
An important and sad part of this story is the failure of college administrations to come to the defense of Jewish students and to even try to create an atmosphere on campus where Jewish students in particular and specifically are not made to feel uncomfortable.
As part of the 2012 Israel Apartheid Week, some members of Students for Justice in Palestine vandalized the campus and defaced the statue of a Jewish donor and trustee of the university with stickers claiming Zionism equals racism.
Zionism means Israel, means Jew. So if somebody says Zionism is bad, so people almost subconsciously take this message as Israel is bad, Jews are bad. I know that on the West is very different and there are a lot of attempts to separate those. But sometimes when you see very consistently leaflets of this type, you really begin to suspect maybe they're not talking about only Zionism.
Anti-Semitic vandalism at Northeastern happened before. In December of 2011, a menorah erected on campus to celebrate Hanukkah was desecrated, apparently not for the first time. Several days later, in a message to the Northeastern community, President Joseph Aoun promised, "We will not tolerate any conduct that creates a hostile or intimidating environment for members of our community." Yet President Aoun did not mention the anti-Semitic hate crime specifically. Instead, he spoke in general and abstract terms. President Aoun took a different approach in dealing with hostility towards another minority. In 2006, an African-American professor, Leonard Brown, received a hateful anonymous voicemail. Commendably, Northeastern's administration, president, and Senate reacted strongly against the incident, condemning it in a number of publications and establishing a committee on community harmony. Speaking at the 2012 Academic Honors Convocation, Northeastern's distinguished professor, Vladimir Torchilin, urged the university's leadership to take a more forceful approach to fighting bigotry.
What I would like to see on campus more mutual respect and tolerance. Or more exactly, to see that each case of intolerance is clearly condemned by our community and leadership rather than allowed to persist by pretending that it doesn't exist.
Several other Jewish professors concerned about the hostility towards Israel and its supporters on Northeastern University campus declined to make these concerns public for fear of retribution. It's time for the university to stop ignoring the problem. Northeastern needs to respond responsibly, as is befitting a great educational institution, to the hostile environment on campus and related anti-Semitic occurrences. the hijacking of Holocaust education and remembrance programs to demonize Israel and compare it to Nazi Germany, the promotion by Northeastern professors of the anti-Semitic notion that the Israel lobby controls American foreign policy, inclusion in the Middle East Studies curriculum of discredited academics who demonize Israelis. Faculty members telling Northeastern students that being an anti-Semite is something to be proud of. Vandalism of a statue of a Jewish trustee of the university. Desecration of the menorah. While the Northeastern administration cannot be held directly responsible for the behavior of individual students, the university is responsible for creating and maintaining a safe and non-hostile learning environment. It must be called to account for its refusal for many years to confront anti-Jewish propaganda being taught in its classrooms by radical faculty. These radical faculty have engaged in a systematic effort to use the school for anti-Israeli propaganda that borders on, and likely encourages, anti-Semitism. Professor Dennis Sullivan's Middle East Center has been carefully constructed to ensure that Northeastern students get a one-sided, bigoted, and deeply unscholarly education about Israel and its supporters. The university must place the Middle East Center under the custodial responsibility of the president until the center complies with Northeastern academic standards. Professors Sullivan and Alam cannot be allowed to indoctrinate students and promote lies. To remedy the university's hostile learning environment, the administration should mandate sensitivity training to the radical professors of the Middle East Center and for members of Students for Justice in Palestine. Northeastern University must treat all the students equally. Offenses against Jewish students must be condemned with the same vigor as offenses against other minorities. Please contact University President Aoun and Provost Director and urge them to ensure that Northeastern University lives up to its own core principles.